Have you ever stared at a live national debt clock? The numbers spin so fast that it is genuinely dizzying to watch. We are talking about trillions upon trillions of dollars, a figure so massive that the human brain struggles to even comprehend it. It is a topic that dominates the news cycle, especially every time a country hits its dreaded debt ceiling, sending waves of panic and uncertainty rippling through global financial markets. And the fears are not entirely unfounded. When a country actually defaults on its debt, the results are nothing short of catastrophic. Just look at the recent economic collapse in Sri Lanka, where an inability to pay off national debt led to severe shortages of food, fuel, and medicine, ultimately sparking nationwide protests and total systemic breakdown. But despite these terrifying worst-case scenarios, a lingering question remains. Why does nearly every single country on Earth owe money? Today, we're going to dive deep and break down the massive, deeply complex world of national debt, explaining exactly how it works, why countries do it, and who they actually owe all this money to. Let's start with the absolute basics. What exactly is national debt? In the financial world, you might hear economists refer to it as public debt or sovereign debt, but they all mean the exact same thing. Put simply, national debt is the total accumulated amount of money that a central national government owes to its various creditors. To be incredibly clear, this number does not include the private debts of a country's citizens. It has absolutely nothing to do with your personal credit card debt, your student loans, or your home mortgage. It also excludes the debts held by private corporations or even local city and state governments. National debt is exclusively the giant financial tab run up by the sovereign national government itself. So this naturally leads to the next big question. Why does a government need to borrow money at all? Unlike a normal person or a business, a national government literally controls the printing presses. Why not just print up a few trillion extra dollars, pay off all the bills, and call it a day? Well, economic history has taught us time and time again that simply printing endless amounts of cash is a recipe for disaster. It leads directly to hyperinflation. If a government floods the economy with new money without any actual economic growth to back it up, the value of that currency plummets, making the money effectively worthless and sending the prices of everyday goods skyrocketing. Because printing money is off the table, governments choose to borrow instead. The primary reason they do this is to cover budget deficits. Every year, a government collects revenue, mostly through taxes, and it spends money on public services, the military, and government programs. When it spends more money than it collects, it runs a deficit, and it has to borrow money to make up the difference. Governments borrow to invest in massive, expensive infrastructure projects that they couldn't otherwise afford up front, like building new national highway systems, upgrading power grids, or expanding high-speed internet. These are investments that will theoretically grow the economy over time. They also borrow to handle sudden, unforeseen national emergencies. For example, during a global pandemic or a massive natural disaster, a government needs immediate access to trillions of dollars to keep the economy afloat, fund medical responses, and issue stimulus checks. And finally, in a move that might surprise you, governments frequently borrow brand new money simply to pay off their old expiring debt, a process known as rolling over the debt. But if almost every country in the world is deeply in debt, who exactly are they borrowing all this money from? The answer is us, them, and everyone in between. When a government wants to borrow money, it doesn't just go to a giant global bank and ask for a loan. Instead, it issues financial instruments called bonds. A bond is essentially a government-backed IOU. When you buy a bond, you are lending the government your cash, and in return, the government promises to pay you back in the future, plus a specific amount of interest. These bonds are bought by domestic lenders, which means everyday citizens buying savings bonds, local commercial banks, and massive retirement and pension funds. Bonds are also bought by foreign lenders. Other sovereign nations and international banks buy government debt because it is generally considered a highly secure place to park their excess cash. And finally, through a complex, highly regulated financial balancing act, a government will sometimes even borrow money indirectly from its own central bank, like the Federal Reserve in the United States, to help manage interest rates and keep the economy stable. Hearing all of this might make you wonder, is national debt actually a bad thing? We are taught from a young age that personal debt is bad, so national debt must be terrible, right? The truth is, sovereign debt is a double-edged sword. When it's managed properly, debt is actually highly beneficial and completely necessary. It's an incredible tool for economic growth, allowing a country to invest heavily in its future, its education systems, and its infrastructure today, rather than waiting decades to save up the cash. But excessive, unmanageable debt is a ticking time bomb. High national debt means a massive and growing portion of the country's annual budget gets eaten up just paying the interest on the loans, taking money away from vital things like healthcare and schools. If the debt gets too high, international credit agencies will lower a country's credit rating. This makes investors nervous, meaning the government has to offer much higher interest rates just to convince people to lend to them, which creates a vicious, accelerating cycle of debt. Push it too far and you end up in a sovereign default crisis. When a country completely runs out of money and defaults, no one will lend to them. They can no longer import vital goods from other nations, and they face total economic collapse. So, with all the risks involved, can a modern country ever just be completely debt-free? While it's technically possible on paper, it's incredibly unrealistic and even undesirable for most modern nations today. Aside from a few massive oil-rich nations with tiny populations, virtually every modern economy relies on debt. In fact, a moderate, sustainable amount of debt is actually necessary to fund vital public services and stimulate growth. Furthermore, government debt plays a crucial role in the global financial system. Government bonds are considered the ultimate safe asset. Trillions of dollars in retirement accounts and pension funds entirely rely on the safe, steady, guaranteed interest provided by government bonds to grow their money and pay out retirees. If a country had no debt, there would be no government bonds, leaving the financial system without its safest foundation. Ultimately, national debt is not just a giant, terrifying bill waiting to be paid off. When handled responsibly, it's the very financial engine that keeps the modern global economy running, growing, and moving forward.